Now we have TypeScript, which stands for type-safe JavaScript. Essentially, it is used to mimic languages that have a stricter type system, which JavaScript's is just not in the slightest. So, what is TypeScript? When it's used properly, it can be 100% type safe. However, it can be difficult to see all of the edge cases in every single situation. It is essentially JavaScript, which things added on top that will compile into more JavaScript. TypeScript brings in new features. Static typing. Essentially, you cannot change a type of an item or a variable without explicitly allowing it during its declaration. You can also create interfaces, which are basically pseudo objects that you can use as types that will force you to build other objects to match the structure of the interface that you've built. It's a little bit complex, but we will get into it, or you will learn more about it in the future. It also brings in enums, which in my opinion aren't very useful, but they allow you to abstract concepts behind efficient named variables and other things. So if you have like an error and you have different types of errors, you can use an enum to create those different types. However, there's a different way to do it that in my opinion is a lot more efficient, or not more efficient, but just easier, and you don't in my opinion enums are very useful. Generics. You can also create dynamic types that allow for complexity and logic in the type system. This can be quite difficult to master, but they are incredibly useful. For example, if you have a function that can return a number or a string based on some sort of input parameters, you can have TypeScript that logically will read your input and give you either a number or a string instead of a number and a string when you return it. And it's really complex and actually very cool and very useful. So, what are the benefits to TypeScript? You can have better autocompletion due to the strictness of the types. It can be very difficult to change the type structure after it has been declared, which is very useful because you really don't want to do that anyway, right? When you declare an object, you don't want to be able to add more properties onto it if the object initially declared doesn't have those properties. So it just kind of defeats the purpose of a strict type system if you're capable of doing that. It can also be significantly easier to understand because complex types can be abstracted to a single name, and using generics that can be even more complex and more fun. However, there are some issues with TypeScript. The biggest complaint that I see anywhere, and when I talk to anybody, it's just the type called any, which basically it just completely defeats the purpose of TypeScript. If you see any type, TypeScript assumes it could literally be anything. So, like, it could be a string, or a number, or an object, or an array, or undefined. It literally could be anything, and TypeScript doesn't know, which just is useless. You want to have strong types. And if you have something that could be anything, you don't know how to use it, and it will be able to be passed into whatever, which is dangerous. It's bad code. So if you see the word any in your code, it is a major red flag, and you should see if you can get rid of it by any means necessary. Even if it means creating a whole new package so that you can get rid of the keyword any, do it, because any sucks. It is bad. In addition, there is no type checking after compile time, which I really don't like. I think that is just bad. If you want that, you have to explicitly do that. I believe this is a major failure in TypeScript because it doesn't allow for type safety in complex code when the program is running. If some functions receives a type that it was not expecting, it should throw an error, not just continue with the function, right? If you have a function that takes in a number and somehow during runtime it gets a string, it should go, hey, I got a string, I'm expecting a number. In compile time, it will do that. It'll say, hey, I'm expecting a number, but I got a string. But somehow it is possible, especially if you use the any keyword or you're using external files like JSONs and stuff like that. It is possible for other things to sneak into your code that are not type safe. So I really hate just the dangers of TypeScript in terms of runtime type checking. You have to explicitly do it yourself, which I really don't like. Then you have typecasting, which basically means you can make any type be any other type by using the as keyword. TypeScript does allow some safety around that to ensure the type that you're casting an object into or a variable into is valid. Like you can cast a like one object into another as long as there are properties that match on both. But it's easy to cast it into something that is invalid and have TypeScript still compile by bypassing it by doing as unknown as this, which just it's basically the same thing as doing any. Like, well, it's not the same thing as doing any, but it has the same effect. You can create whatever you want when it isn't that, and it's just bad TypeScript. So I'll before we get into it, I want to demonstrate some things. So here's some JavaScript, and I'm going to have a TypeScript file that is identical, basically. So I create a constant called JSObject, and I declare foo equals bar, which bar is a string, right? So if I redeclare foo to be baz, that's okay. If I add a property onto it, like bar equals baz, that's okay. If I change the type of foo to be a number instead of a string, that's okay. Even you can redeclare the constant. Which is so dumb. I hate that. Why would I want to redeclare a constant? One, it's a constant, and two, that doesn't even make sense. Why would this be valid? In TypeScript, it doesn't allow a lot of this. So one, I cannot redeclare a block scoped variable TSObject because it's declared. It's already there. I can't redo it. Next thing is it's okay to define a property that is already set as long as the same type. So this is a string, that's a string, it's valid. But if I try to add on another thing onto a TSObject, it'll throw an error because it doesn't exist. That type does not exist on there. Okay, and then TSObject.foo, the number is not assignable to a string. Maybe I can do as string. Can I do that? Nope, I'm not allowed to. It won't let me. But I could do as unknown as string. This is where the TypeScript gets sucks. I could also do any, which that gets rid of all of the errors. And if I get rid of this, still gets rid of all of the errors. This any keyword just defeats the entire purpose of TypeScript. So I can't declare something as a different type than it's declared. I can't add new properties on unless I create the property bar undefined. And then now I'm declaring that, but I could say foo string bar string or undefined. Whoops, not string. String. And now bar is allowed, but if I try to use bar, TSObject.bar, this can be string, but if I get rid of that, it can be string or undefined. And so when you're using properties, when you're using things, it'll constrict you, which is fantastic. You want to be constricted. You want to have strong code, which TypeScript allows for. Okay. And then if you want to have it be also a number, and now all of it is valid. Okay. So TypeScript is really beneficial for a lot of things, but mostly it just gets rid of the flexibility of JavaScript. It allows some flexibility if you're doing it wrong, like using the any or casting it poorly, but it gets rid of the flexibility that you really don't want. So let's get into it.